So, all right, thanks for the introduction, Will. I've been working for Pheasants Forever in this role, kind of as a statewide contact for the Conservation Stewardship Program for NRCS and Pheasants Forever and other partners for about almost 3 years now. And so I'm going to give you kind of a general overview of the program because it's historically been kind of underutilized by the wildlife community. And then hopefully later, Matt will get into some details on one project that's kind of more along in the process and is a really exciting project. So without further ado, let's see here. Whoops. Okay, so what is a conservation stewardship program? The acronym I'm going to be using from here on out is CSP. It's much less of a mouthful that way. Sometimes you'll see it as CSTP. I'm going to kind of assume most people on this talk here are not familiar with the program, so I'm just going to go through some basics here. It's a farm bill program administered through USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, and it's available nationwide to farming and ranching operations. It's intended to build upon the existing conservation efforts already taking place on a farmer or rancher's operation. Ideally, a producer would use EQIP, CRP, or any other number of programs to kind of get started, like doing the initial removal of cedar trees, putting in some grazing infrastructure, maybe starting cover crops. And then they would roll into this program, CSP, to add kind of all the bells and whistles. The goal of the program is then to identify what resource concerns each individual operation has, and then create a plan to address those resource concerns. In order for a farm or ranch to be eligible for this program, they first have to be listed as the operator, not necessarily the owner of the land, and then already meet a minimum conservation stewardship threshold, which is determined by a series of questions, site visits, and some other tools. And throughout this process, it also helps identify areas of the operation that are in most need of conservation, and then kind of comes up with a list of eligible practices and activities that is going to be unique to each individual application, and then made to the producer, and then ideally into a contract. Since this program was first rolled out in a 2002 Farm Bill, Nebraska has become one of the top states that utilizes the program. Currently, we have approximately 6.3 million acres enrolled in the program in Nebraska. And the program rewards and then incentivizes producers through annual payments based on land use type, and then based on what sort of conservation activities are selected to be completed within the 5-year contract agreement. There's also going to be a payment for existing conservation stewardship level. So it does try to better reward producers who are already doing more conservation versus those doing less. And then the more activities that they decide to complete, they'll get additional incentives within the contract. It also makes their application more appealing and rank higher. And I'll go into more details about wildlife activities in a few slides. But this is just kind of the general overview of what we have and how this program works. And it's a very large workload for a lot of our USDA staff, NRCS staff. And it encompasses a lot more than just wildlife, but I'm hoping to focus on wildlife in this presentation. So how does this work with wildlife? So NRCS has 10 resource concerns, and of one of those, it's fish and wildlife. We currently have approximately 60 to 70 activities, also known as enhancements, available within CSP, which specifically address fish and wildlife as the resource concern. Each one of those activities has a national job sheet, and that's going to outline the intent of the practice. It's going to give some general guidance on how to complete the practice. And then each state comes up with its own supplement to that to provide further guidance and requirements that make it more effective on the local level. So for example, those state supplements would include things like what types of species and forbs and percentage of grasses are allowed in a seed mix, what types of shrubs or trees are appropriate in a woody planting, and other local references. And so in order for a producer to meet the wildlife resource concern, they would have to already be or plan to address some of the different aspects of wildlife habitat such as food and cover, resources, continuity of habitat, of water availability, and then forestry. And then it also adds a few extra bells and whistles. So things such as implementing more wildlife-friendly fences or removing predator perches. Those are also options in the program. The applicants are not required to address all 10 resource concerns. So not every contract is going to be addressing or even have wildlife-related activities in it. And there are other wildlife benefits to some of the other activities, like Adam was mentioning earlier, when it comes to water quality, or adding different types of crops in the rotation. But I'm focusing on the ones that directly address wildlife. So in order to carry out most of the wildlife activities, there needs to be a wildlife biologist approval or involved in some degree with the planning of the project. And this is going to ensure that the appropriate target species are selected and that the appropriate planning for those species is going to occur. This would prevent, for example, targeting monarch butterflies, but the planting doesn't have milkweed in it. So that's a super basic example, but you get the idea. So a biologist is going to help to develop and approve a habitat management plan, any associated job sheets, such as seeding sheets, and then determine if and what sort of follow-up surveys or evaluation needs to be completed. And actually, on a lot of our national job sheets, it does say that we need to select a target species, and for several of those, it does specifically mention that those species need to come from the state's wildlife action plan. So here in Nebraska, that would be our Nebraska Natural Legacy Project. And then for the fun of it, I went ahead and tried to see if any other states had fancy names for their state wildlife action plans, and I didn't find any. I didn't go through all 50 states, so if anyone knows of another fun name one, let me know. So that either makes it easier for us here in Nebraska or more confusing. It kind of depends. And since I do provide guidance in this program on a statewide level to a lot of NRCS staff, I've done my best to familiarize myself with the Nebraska Legacy Project and have some notes. And I also do loop in local biologists where appropriate. So we have Farm Bill biologists and Game and Parks biologists do have a hand in these sorts of projects all over the state. So here in Nebraska, I'm kind of summarizing some of our most popular CSP wildlife related activities for the last 4 federal fiscal years. Fiscal year 2020 just completed at the end of September. I haven't had a chance to go through and summarize that data yet because it wasn't even available until just a few weeks ago. So if you're interested in that information, send me a message and I'd be happy to talk with you and show you what we have for that. Tree and shrub related activities include anything that's a tree or shrub planting, and it also includes a lot of forestry practices such as creating snag trees or bat habitat. So it does capture a wide range of types of projects, but this is always one of our most popular wildlife related activity. Leaving standing grain, which is leaving part of the cash grain crop unharvested, is also typically very popular. It doesn't do a lot as far as creating additional wildlife habitat, but a lot of producers like doing it because it's easy to do. It's pretty straightforward. So it's always, I think, is always going to be something that they like to do. Anything that's pollinator related, so putting in monarch habitat or just pollinator habitat is also really popular. There's been a lot of pollinator push lately from a lot of different avenues. And also the pollinator practices do pay a little bit more than some of the others, so that does make it a little bit appealing. Conservation cover just kind of captures any sort of other vegetative plantings. That's always, kind of easy for folks to do, and there's different target, different reasons to plant the different plantings. Structures for wildlife are mostly going to be doing things like creating loose brush piles for wildlife. And then I also did include some fire-related activities because prescribed fire is kind of a big push to do, good landscape level management. However, it's not popular in the program. There's only been a handful in the last couple of years. And I mean, we could go on and talk about maybe why that is, but it's just not a popular activity. And then brush management is also being utilized a lot, mostly for removing cedar trees and locust trees from our grasslands. And then you do find some other things as well. Keep in mind, this is summarized on a statewide level. If you're interested in, say, what's in your NRD or your Game and Parks District area, I'd be happy to break those down and share those with you. So just, feel free to reach out on those. With that being said, Matt, I was going to hand it over to you. I thought it'd be fun to maybe have Matt share, kind of give a good example of a project that is ongoing. It's more in the completed stages of the program. So, Matt, you ready to go?
It looks like I can't share my screen while you're still sharing.
Okay, I'm trying to unshare it. I'll tell you.
There it is.
Okay.
Perfect. Now, okay, there we go. So this is a example of a local project we did out here. I'll say up front, this one was not designed with a lot of legacy benefits directly in mind or funded specifically from that set of funds, but I think similar projects could have a lot of legacy benefits. So we threw it out as a kind of a unique example that we took input from a lot of different angles to make it work. This particular project is on Dead Horse Creek. It lies roughly 5 miles southwest of Chadron. For those familiar with the area, it's in kind of the flat crop country for the most part between the Pine Ridge and the White River. There's this creek, East and West Ash are pretty similar. Bordeaux Creek, a number of creeks flowing out of the Pine Ridge down to the White River are pretty similar to this one. So as Jane mentioned, it was a NRCS project and they provided the only direct funding to it. The landowner provided all the labor, and within Game and Parks, we work closely with the NRCS office, but we use both of our fisheries staff and our wildlife staff provide some input on this. So what you see here is, well, we went out and did our initial evaluation on the stream, and one of the things that our fisheries office picked off right away, the landowner had signed up to add woody debris within the stream. And when our fisheries staff looked at it, they realized that in 2013, I forget the proper name for it, Atlas was a winter storm Atlas, came through the area in early October and stripped a lot of leaves, stripped a lot of trees. There's a ton of down timber throughout our riparian community. So a lot of that had ended up in the stream. And the stream was really already loaded with a lot of woody debris and then the leaves behind it, and that had loaded up with sediment. So the first thing our fishery staff wanted the landowner to do was actually to go through and pull a lot of that debris out, let a season worth of water come down and kind of flush that sediment out. So we were really lucky. The first spring after he did that work, we got a good flush, cleaned everything out, actually dropped that water level by about 2 foot, which normally you'd think is cutting down and a bad thing, but in this case, it was just pulling the sediment out and getting back down to the base that was there. So didn't consider it bad at all. And then they started adding the debris back in. One other thing I should note on this, several people have talked today about how the landowners are the key to all of this and having the right perspective from them and so on. That was one of the neatest things about this one. This is only an 80-acre parcel that we worked on here, half-mile long, but it's owned by a guy who's the 5th generation on this particular stretch of stream. His kids, who are currently in high school and college, are the 6th generation. His parents and his grandfather, so 3rd and 4th generation, are on adjacent stretches of stream. So between the 3rd through 6th generation, you've got 3 miles of continuous stream here, handled by the same family. Tremendous history in it, and that's really what brought them into the office for this. I think they remember what it was like when they were kids and trying to bring something back. So with that, okay, a little bit of a closer view of, I need to move something out of the way here. See this better? You can see some of the debris that they placed into the stream. They just picked up a lot of the trunks and limbs and so on that they had laying already in the area and placed them in using some of the existing terrain to lock stuff into place. It's just lying slightly below the stream level. Over on the left side, you can kind of see how that is capturing the leaves and so on and behind again, but it's also creating some flow going into unusual places. And or instead of the stream just cutting straight down through the middle and so on, it's creating that flow that goes side to side. It's creating shallow areas, deeper areas, and so on throughout the stretch. Again, just a couple more examples of some places where he put the materials in and how it is changing the stream flow up a bit out there. And I thought this was a good example of showing how he used the existing, some of the roots and so on that were sticking out. He went ahead and locked the new stuff that he put in into that. And you can see also, hopefully you can see my cursor here, but you can see some of the other debris that he put in and how that's flowing through here. And I've got an example further out of how that all kind of comes together. Okay, so over here on the left, can you see the cursor that I've got on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. The stream is flowing from right to left here. And what you'll notice is instead of just kind of coming down, shooting down through the middle, through this log coming across, it actually kicks back in here, creates a bit of an undercut bank. Very nice for a wide variety of fish there. And then it kind of creates a little eddy coming back through here. So just a short video to see how that works. So yeah, just a little, whether you're part of a program or not, you know, this probably took him 10 minutes. Uh-oh. My screen went blank on me. Okay, 1 second. But with just a few minutes worth of work within these streams, you can really create some pretty dramatic changes in how everything flows through. So, and the last thing I want to add that speaking of dramatic changes, this area in general, although there's a lot of historical records of beaver in the area from the trappers and so on, they are largely absent from the landscape in this area anymore. And so the landowner is actually very excited to see this photo on the left is maybe a quarter mile upstream from where he did this work. That was the first beaver dam that was created last year or the year before, I forget, but very recently. And there is actually a lodge in the bank just upstream from that. And since then, they have moved further upstream and created 3 more dams as well further on up. So both through the work that he's doing and from what the beaver is doing, this is a pretty neat stretch of the stream that's seen a lot of changes throughout the last 2 years here. With that, it looks like I'm pretty much hitting the question time where Will's going to cut me off, so I better stop there.